Welcome to the Rotary Club of Beaumont, where we've been making a difference since 1913. You are in for a treat today, and I want to welcome all of our many visitors and all the Rotarians with us today as well. And I appreciate all those folks that wore pink today. The last time I saw so much pink in one room was the first, and not coincidentally, the last time my wife allowed me to do the laundry all by myself. Never judge someone by the way he looks, or a book by the way it is covered. For inside the tattered pages, there's a lot to be discovered. Invocation today will be by Lynn Castle, Executive Director, Art Museum of Southeast Texas. Pledges to our nation and our state by Lynn Hill, and she told me to introduce herself as the backbone of Nuvation Tech. Sorry about that, Sylvester. Introduction of guest, Uliana Trolowski, Development Officer, Lamar University. Lynn.
Please bow your heads with me. Heavenly Father, teach us that even if we can't do great things, we can at least do small things in a great way. May we always be sincere in our efforts to help others in need. Please bless our women and the men who support our women. Amen.
Amen.
Good afternoon, Rotarians and guests. Would you please join me in the pledges to the United States flag and the Texas flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. We're glad to have everyone here. For the sake of time and to let our speaker actually have a chance to talk, I'm not going to introduce all of our guests because I would be up here all day. So let me just say the following. We have Rotarians here, visiting Rotarians from the following clubs: Nacogdoches, Nederland, Spindletop, Vidor, Hardin County, and Port Arthur. We're glad to have all our visiting Rotarian friends, and we have a whole number of wonderful guests here today, and we're glad to have you all here, and we hope you enjoy the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, welcome to our guests. Please come back anytime. We'd love to have you again. Now to introduce the program will be Rebecca Maxwell, Coordinator with Rio Honors College.
Thank you all so much for being here today. I'm very excited to have worked with this program this year and have the opportunity to work for International Women's Day. If you have served on this committee this past year, would you please stand so we can give you a round of applause? Yeah. Thank you. And Jackie in the back, she didn't stand, but she was a very important part of all of this. I just want to thank you all because you made this day come together and such a success. International Women's Day is designated as March 8th and is celebrated in many places around the world on a very grand scale. The purpose of this day of recognition, stated on the United Nations website, says, International Women's Day is a time to reflect on the progress made, to call for change, and to celebrate acts of courage and determination by ordinary women who have played an extraordinary role in the history of their countries and their communities. Our celebration of Women's Day at the Rotary Club of Beaumont started in 2016 when Teresa Simpson brought several members of the club together to talk about a special program reflecting on the roles of women in Rotary and the progress that has been made, especially in celebrating ordinary women who have played extraordinary roles, and indeed some extraordinary ones, made significant contributions to the work of Rotary. The history of women in Rotary is not lengthy, as Rotary only started to include women about 31 years ago. In our club, the Rotary Club of Beaumont, the first mention in the Rotarygrams of a female member was introduced to the club at a meeting on June 28th in 1978. That mention was of Evelyn Lord, and I saw her here today, Evelyn Lord, but it was quickly realized that this was a spoof. It was actually a joke on the club and on the outgoing president, Danny Wheat, during his swan song. And we can only imagine that there's more to that story that I'm sure Evelyn would be happy to share. As a small gesture of our appreciation for all Evelyn has done in the community, many of you know she was mayor for a number of years, and in blazing the trail for women in the Rotary Club of Beaumont, albeit it was at first just a joke, we have this bouquet of flowers that we would like to present her. Seemingly small acts can go quite a long way. It was not long for our club to select and admit the first female member, longtime executive director Margaret Sherb, who officially was named the first female member on August 26, 1987. And within a few years, names of female members were beginning to be seen more and more frequently on both election ballots and on the list of board members. Then, 10 years later, on July 2nd, 1997, the first female president of the Rotary Club of Beaumont took the gavel, Lois Ann Stanton. The Rotary Club of Beaumont's history documents 5 female club presidents. Lois Ann Stanton, 1997. Maureen Gray served 2004 to 2005. Angela Baker, who served 2007 to 2008. Bobby Applegate, who served 2010 to 2011, and Becky Mason, who some of you may recall she was just announced as the 2020 to 21 district governor. She served as our club president 2012 to 13 and the centennial year. And this year, we will look forward to having our 6th female president of the Rotary Club of Beaumont with Lynn Castle coming in next year. The Rotary Club of Beaumont currently boasts of 83 active female members, which is 35% of our membership. We also have 10 female honorary members for a total of 93 ladies. Our ladies are active in the club projects and activities, serve on the board, and chair many committees. And you may have seen some different pictures rolling through of ways that they've served and pictures of ladies and men serving together. We are also proud of the next generations of Rotarians. Madison Marino is currently serving as the Lamar University Rotaract president, and the last 3 or 4 Rotaract presidents of that club have actually been female students. There may be no more firsts for women in the Rotary Club of Beaumont, but because we are now equal partners in the mission of service above self, and we work shoulder to shoulder with men who serve humanity. Now I'll turn it over to President Tim to introduce our special speaker.
Thank you, Rebecca. And I do want to acknowledge Rebecca and her committee for making all this happen today. There was a lot of work going ahead of time, as you are aware. They visited a lot of the area clubs to announce this program today, and got a lot of traction for that as well. But a lot of work goes in behind that. Not meaning to brag, but I won the lottery. So Becky Mason, who did a whole lot of work to bring Dr. Whitlock with us today, could not be here to introduce our guest, and so she asked me to do so. But the reason I won the lottery was yesterday I had the privilege of escorting Dr. Whitlock from Houston Hobby Airport to Beaumont, and we talked about a lot of different things. So that made my president year so far today. That was one of my highlights. A lot of things that we discussed were about some of the things that you'll hear today, but we also talked family, grandchildren, how she was raised by her grandmother, and how strong of an influence she was on her life. But I want to just do a brief introduction. Becky sent me a bio today, and I could spend 20 minutes going through it, but I do want to hit a few of the highlights. First, she studied at Cambridge University in England. She got her Doctor of Education from Claremont Graduate School, a master's in marriage and family therapy. She is currently licensed in marriage and family therapy and currently practices in the state of California. As a side note, we were at the Masons last night, and I spied her across the room talking to my wife. And Dr. Whitlock was going like this and like that. So I'm not sure what the conversation was about, but I'm going to take it as it was positive. Of course, you know that Dr. Whitlock happened to be the first female president of Rotary International, but there's a lot of other Rotary accomplishments. First of all, she held every officer at the club level. She participated in several district opportunities as well, including assistant governor, and then again as district governor in 2012-13. She's also very active in a lot of community activities, not even related to Rotary, one of which is, I hope I say this right, Piali Junction, which is a learning center for girls and women in India. So she is very active not only in Rotary, but also in her community as well. The only downside to her bio, and I need to mention this, is that she is a very strong Golden State Warriors fan. So, but with everything else there, I think the balance is on the positive side. So please help me welcome Dr. Sylvia Whitlock.
Actually, I'm a Steph Curry fan. That's what it is. Not so much Golden State Warriors, as I love that guy. Several things I need to tell you in the beginning today. Number one, I can't see anybody past the first table. So whatever you're doing, if it's, illicit or something, I can't tell. I had cataract surgery, and it's still getting there, so I can't see a lot of things. Number two, I'm about to make an instant friend. Does anybody have a birthday today? Yesterday? Tomorrow? 2 days from today? 3 days from today? Oh, 3 days, 2 days from today?
On Sunday.
Yours is Sunday. Sunday's how many days? Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Is yours on Sunday also?
Saturday.
Okay, so you win the prize.
And hers was last Sunday.
In my room when I arrived yesterday was this beautiful bouquet of flowers, and I couldn't possibly leave it, and I couldn't fit it in my suitcase. So I brought it here, it's on that table, and it now belongs to you. You may go and pick it up. And that's instant friend. Okay, I need to say thanks to Becky, who really did all the work in putting this together. And also to Tim, he talked about our ride yesterday. Well, I said, Tim, how long is it going to take to get from Houston to Beaumont? And he said, oh, it's about 90 miles. And I thought, yeah. It went by just like that because he kept me engaged the whole time. He talked, he asked questions. He obviously read my book because he was asking lots of stuff that came out of it. But he was just wonderful, and I didn't have one dull moment on that ride. Now, it's going to be interesting because I can't read this. Anyhow, I also need to say thanks to Rebecca because she took me today and showed me what I had never seen before, and that's a no-barrier playground, the ones that you guys have put together out there, and that was fascinating for me. I also saw your garden. What's it called?
Community garden.
The community garden where you grow stuff, and that's another nice. These are all ideas I'm going to take back with me to California. We think California is God's country, really. I moved to California because it looked like Jamaica. It had palm trees. But there's so many things that you do here, and this is probably my 10th trip to Texas, although I've never been to Beaumont, but it's nice to be in Beaumont. Let's see, I thanked Tim, I gave away the flowers. Okay. Somebody said somewhere in the introduction today that Rotary takes ordinary people and gives them extraordinary opportunities. That is a fact, okay? I'm a Rotarian. Maybe I can see better without this. I'm a Rotarian, and my name is Sylvia Whitlock. And how did I get to be a Rotarian? So my club fought for 11 years, 11 years, count them, to get women into Rotary. And this is really kind of strange. This is a humanitarian organization that was fighting to get women into Rotary. This year, we're celebrating 30 years. It depends on where you start counting, because actually the women were invited more than 30 years ago, probably more than something like 40 years ago. But it took 11 years for the case to go through the courts to get us to this point. It's almost a phenomenon in that has attracted so much attention. And I keep wondering, why am I 30 years later still talking about this? The reason I'm talking about this is that how many of you were alive, even born, when we were going through this, and knew that there was a time when women couldn't just even serve? The title of my book over there, was that a nice segue? The title of my book is Women Also Serve. But there was a time when women weren't allowed to be in service clubs, and Rotary wasn't the only service club that women couldn't join. So I've done a lot of thinking about what the climate must have been in 1976 when Rotary decided they didn't want to have women in Rotary. So here was a humanitarian organization dedicated to serving the needs of humanity. I'm going to try these again. Worldwide, but with a specific disposition, a gender disposition, gender discrimination against women working alongside them, and a position that they pressed for 11 years, even as it violated the third and fourth lines of the four-way test. Well, may have been more than the third and fourth lines, but is it the truth? Or was it truth they objected to having women in Rotary? Was it fair to all concerned? What do you think? No, probably wasn't. Did it build goodwill and better friendship? No. Would it be beneficial to all concerned? No. And the four-way test was out there. So this is supposed to be what Rotarians do and think in everything they do. So something happened along the way. I worked in a small school district in California, probably maybe about 10 miles east of Pasadena, and Pasadena is where the Rose Parade comes from every year, if you guys are trying to locate it. And in this small school district, we had a superintendent, Richard Key, and he is the person who should be standing here, except Richard Key is no longer alive. But Richard Key was the person who thought, you know, we have a club with declining membership, and we need to invite some members. And he looked around and he thought, look at all these women, able-bodied women around here who could be good Rotarians. But he didn't know any Rotary clubs that had Rotarians. And so he thought, you know, I'm going to try this out. And so he called the district governor and he said, you know, there are a couple of school principals and a psychologist in my district I'd like to have join Rotary. What do you think? And the governor, the district governor, who didn't pass the four-way test either, said to Richard, oh, I think that's a pretty good idea, but you know what? When you register them with International, don't send in their full names. Just send in their first name initials. Was that designed to deceive? Wasn't the truth, was it? He didn't want International to be told that these were women who were being invited. So Richard thought, okay, we'll go with this. And he thought he'd invite people to join the Rotary Club of Duarte. Well, when I was invited to join the Rotary Club of Duarte, I didn't know anything about Rotary. Much like most of you out there who didn't know anything about Rotary till you were invited. I mean, I knew about Kiwanis. Do you know what Kiwanis means? It means waiting to get into Rotary. So you guys are laughing. I didn't make that up. You know who told me that? A good Kiwanis member told me that. He was the assistant superintendent of schools in Duarte, and he told me that. But I also knew about Elks because they wear those interesting hats. And I remember walking the streets of New York and you see people in Elks hats and you say, who are those? And they say Elks. And you say, oh, Elks. And that was it. You know, you didn't ask what they did. But I also knew about Lions because, see, I was a school principal and Lions worked with providing eyeglasses for all the kids in school. So I knew about Lions. But I literally had never heard anything about Rotary, not an uncommon occurrence. So when I was asked to join, it was my opportunity to learn stuff about Rotary, And a number of international presidents have addressed the fact that Rotary is not as known as it should be around the world because we don't talk about it. New Rotarians have no idea what transpired between 1976 and 1987. You know, there was a time when you had maybe clubs who were interested and who knew that Doherty was inviting women. There was a huge club up in Seattle called the Seattle Five that had actually had a huge lawsuit based on their invitation to women. But they didn't do all the things that we did when we invited the women, and so they kind of dropped out. Actually, when the women were invited to join Rotary, the Constitution, the Rotary Constitution said Rotarians should be persons of good character. At one time, it had morphed into men of good character. Nobody knows why. The original Constitution did say persons, but you can figure out that at that time, there were not a lot of women out there in the workaday world. There were mostly men. So it didn't take much for it to morph into men of good character. So people have talked about the fact that the bylaws were violated. That was not the issue. We invited the women to join Rotary. They came in, the district governor approved it, and so everything went swimmingly for about 2 years, and then we were celebrating an anniversary of the club. And so you know what happens when you celebrate an anniversary. Rotary International sends its reps to observe with you and to congratulate you, and so they came, and the women were introduced. And the reps thought, we don't have women in Rotary, what is this? And so they kind of whispered around and people said, oh yeah, these are Rotarians. And so the reps just stayed, they enjoyed the rest of the party and they went back to Evanston and they said, you know what, there's a little renegade club in Duarte that has women they think are Rotarians. So we need to straighten this out. Well, Rotary didn't lose any time in sending us a memo, quick memo that said, women are not allowed in Rotary. 3 things was all it said. Women are not allowed in Rotary. Number 2, the women need to be asked to leave. Number 3, if they do not leave, you need to stop calling yourself a Rotary club. Just like that, boom, boom, boom. And so we thought, okay, maybe we can appeal to the board of directors of Rotary International. So we sent a notice saying we requested to appeal to them about the membership of women. And the board of directors said, we only listen to real Rotary clubs. If you have women in there, you're not a real Rotary club, and so you can't do it. And so we thought, well, maybe we can appeal to the Council on Legislation, which that year, coming year, was meeting in Tokyo, and you could put an item on the agenda. And so we tried to phrase the item so it would represent what we wanted, but it did not. Because when the issue came up for consideration at the Council on Legislation, it was not whether women should be admitted to Rotary, but it was whether the Rotary Club of Duarte had violated Rotary's bylaws by inviting women to join. You know, of course we had. But some people didn't pay any attention to that and were really interested in having women. And the vote was something like 1,000 to 34, some weird number. Actually, there were 34 people at that COL who thought that women should have been in Rotary. And I met one of those persons the year the convention was in Calgary. How many of you remember that? Remember the convention was in Calgary? I was on the train riding into the convention center, and I was sitting across from a gentleman and his wife. I was wearing my tags. You know, you wear your name tags. It has your whole pedigree on it and a big Duarte on it. And the gentleman across from me said, "Duarte, is that the club that invited women to Rotary?" And I have this big smile on my face. "Do I look like a Rotarian?" "Yeah." So I said, "Yes, we are." And he said, "Actually, I was at the convention. I was at the COL when the issue came up. And I voted to have women in Rotary because I always thought they should be there." And his wife, sitting right next to him, sweet lady sitting right next to him, said, "I didn't think so then, and I don't think so now." And I thought, okay. Why? And she went on to explain that their meetings take place mostly at night, and she didn't want her husband going out meeting in some strange place with women she didn't know. And I said, you know, it's not a social club, it's a service club, and they're really working on, and she didn't care what it was. She didn't want her husband going out there. So, and you need to know this, that a lot of the objections came from women who didn't want their husbands going to clubs and meeting with men. So there we were. Let's see what I really need to tell you. Okay. The council legislation turned us down, you know, and we thought, where do we go from here? Well, in a neighboring club, we had an attorney. How many attorneys are out there in the audience? Because this is a good thing for you to follow. You can look it up when you go back. I'm going to tell you all this stuff. Sanford Smith was his name. He was an attorney in the Arcadia Rotary Club. And he said, you know, I think we can take this to the courts, this business of having women join the service club. And so he gave Rotary notice that he was going to take it to the courts. And the first thing that Rotary did was petition that it be heard in federal court, because they had a case that went the way they wanted, that had to do with discrimination, go the way they wanted in federal court, so they wanted it heard in federal court because they said not all the members of our board of directors are Californians. They didn't want it heard in California. But the court ruled that it be heard in the California court. So it was first heard in the Superior Court in California, and the Superior Court said, Rotary has a right to choose whom it wants as members. Well, this was a shock for us because, number one, membership was the issue, and we had not ever looked at the civil rights aspect of that issue. We were looking at growing a club and gaining members. So here was a court saying, Rotary can choose to not have you as members. And so, you know, there was first one down. So everybody went back to the books. The attorneys went back to their books, and they all looked it up, and they appealed to the Court of Appeals. And the appellate court looked at this, but I got to read this to you. The decision was based really, why does this sound different when I have my glasses on? Okay. I have to tell you what happened at the Court of Appeals. Okay. That's what I'm going to talk now. I can't see when I can talk into the mic. Jack Davis, who was president of Rotary International when all this was going on, said, the unity of Rotary International is jeopardized by the unilateral move of the Duarte Club. So they sent a representative to Duarte, and they took the charter of the Duarte Club. So when Sanford Smith represented us, he was representing not a Rotary Club. One of our members, a very bright member who also worked for the City of Hope, said, that's okay, we'll continue to work as a Rotary Club. We'll just put an X over the Rotary symbol, and we'll call ourselves the Ex-Rotary Club of Duarte. And we were the ex-Rotary Club of Duarte for probably 11 years. So when Sanford Smith took our case to the courts, we were the ex-Rotary Club of Duarte. And the difference in projects at that time was that we didn't do international projects because we didn't have the blessing of Rotary International, but we served our community the way we always had. So the first Superior Court turned us down, and we had to go back to the drawing board. And so we were appealed to the Court of Appeals in California. That court cited the Unruh Act, which probably most states have. It may be called something else. But the Unruh Act bans discrimination in public accommodations, and Rotary was deemed to be public accommodation. In fact, at that time, probably 80% of Rotarians had their dues paid by their employers. So one of the policies, this is what I want to read to you, underlying the enactment of the Unruh Act was the eradication of discrimination by private or public action on the basis of gender by business establishments, and in the furnishing of accommodations, advantages, facilities, privileges, or services. The Unruh Act was clearly a declaration of California's public policy mandate and objective that men and women be treated equally. Both its history and language disclose a clear and large design to interdict all arbitrary discrimination by a business enterprise. Enacted into law in 1959, it emanated from and was modeled after traditional public accommodations legislation. It expanded the reach of such statutes from common carriers and places of public accommodation and recreation like railroads, hotels, restaurants, theaters, and the like to include all business establishments of any kind whatsoever. And the Unruh Act does not cover relationships that are considered private, continuous, personal, or social, and which take place more or less out of public view. Here we are meeting in a public place. So Rotary International immediately appealed to the California Superior Court, California Supreme Court, because that's the route. First it went to the Superior Court, then it went to the Court of Appeals, and Rotary International was not giving up, and so they appealed to the California Supreme Court. Interestingly enough, while all this was going on, Rotary was paying attorneys' fees to press all this case. We were assisted by the ACLU, who really came on as our friend, and by the Seattle 5 group, who wrote an amicus brief with us and helped us, and it didn't cost us anything to push this suit. However, the California Supreme Court refused to take the case, which essentially said, we agree with what the appellate court said. So here we are with a decision that says, because they reversed the Superior Court, here we are with a decision that says, no, women have to be in Rotary based on the Unruh Act. It's illegal to ban women, no discrimination. And so this is a California court, however. So remember that this decision is incumbent only on California. So this is where things really started getting crazy, okay? This was the year that I was coming in as president. I was a president-elect. And so because California was bound by this decision, I was invited to attend PETS. And as most of you know, things change very slowly before women came into Rotary. And we have pets. We've always had pets of one kind or another. And so the invitations were sent out to incoming president-elects to come to PETS. But they have all their stationery. It's been there for years. And so I got the postcard that said, PETS is going to be held at Garden Grove at such and such a time, and be sure you bring your coat and tie because directory pictures will be taken. Why should they change it for one person? There was only one woman there who wasn't wearing a coat and tie, and I could manage a coat and tie. So I went to that. It was in Garden Grove. And at that PETS, real interesting experience for me, there were 290 men and not even one woman speaker. Women didn't have that much to say, they think. So the 290 men and one woman. But the nicest thing about that configuration is that at restroom time, see, I told this to Tim last night. He didn't believe me. When I started to tell that story, I could say at restroom time they emptied the whole floor, but that's not it. At restroom time, there were long lines outside the men's restrooms. And one person going into the ladies' restroom. And I used to tell people, you know, this was 35 years ago, 30 or so. I could just sashay past, because I could sashay then. I mean, heck, you know, I'm 80 now, I wasn't 80 then, into the ladies' restroom. But I have to tell you this, the men were cordial, they were friendly, they were interested in what was going on, they were curious about it. I never met one person who made any snide remarks or any strange comments. They were all very warm and courteous. And because Pets, you know, assigns you table seating, I don't have to go around and say, can I sit at your table? Can I sit at your table? No, I know where I'm going to sit. And they know where I'm going to sit. So Pets, that part of it was okay. There is a session at Pets that talks about Rotary International. And at that session, which was led by our district governor, of course, the case came up. And at this point, for the first time, we're hearing what Rotary International is going to do. And so he talked a little bit about the case. And he said, you know, this was just brought up by a little club that, you know, didn't have many members. In fact, it was just kind of like the mouse that roared, you know. And he said, Rotary International is going to appeal this to the United States Supreme Court. Are you guys listening? And I thought, the U.S. Supreme Court is going to hear this? See, again, I wasn't into the civil rights mode. And I thought, yay, you know, we're not Board of Education, Topeka, Kansas, we're not that. We're not Roe versus Wade. Why would they want to hear about women in a service club? See, wrong. My head was not there where it needed to be. He said, this is just a case of the mouse that roared. Well, I'm sitting in the audience, the only woman in this room, and I'm writing furiously, and I thought, I'll go back to my club, and we'll make a new banner, and we'll call it the Rotary Club of Duarte, the mouse that roared. And that's what we did. And then we made a mouse pin, little mouse with a little Rotary icon on its back, and we wore that. And of course, we had our Rotary pin with a big X on it, because we were the ex-Rotary Club of Duarte for a while. So we had all these little things which I've given away. We need to get a whole new stock of these because people keep asking for them. So we went back from Pets, and lots of people came to see our club. Lots of people from Germany, from Japan, wanted to see this little club that had turned Rotary on its heel, and you know, and we're sitting there. I'm still thinking the Supreme Court's never going to hear this case. Well, guess what? They did. They did. And 4 months, it took only 4 months for the Supreme Court to hear this case and to deliver a verdict. And this is what they're saying, and I'm going to tell you, I want to read this also. May the 4th, 1987, May the 4th, 1987, only 4 months after they took the case, the court found that considering the size, purpose, selectivity, and exclusivity of Rotary's membership, the relationship among the club's members was not of the intimate or private variety which warrants First Amendment protections, which is what Rotary International wanted. So writing for the unanimous court, it was 7-0. Two other justices, as well as Sandra Day O'Connor, did not vote because her husband was a Rotarian. That would have been a sticky issue. Justice Powell argued that many of Rotary's activities, including their meetings, are conducted in the presence of strangers, and because women members would not prevent the club from carrying out its purposes, there was no violation of associational rights. Furthermore, he said, and this was the big piece of it, even if there were a slight encroachment on the rights of Rotarians to associate, that minimal infringement would be justified, since it serves the state's compelling interest in ending sexual discrimination. And there was the verdict. The decision was now incumbent on all USA clubs. So then it got even crazier. I was driving to my job as principal of an elementary school. I was probably about maybe 7 in the morning, and I heard the news on the radio. But we're California, and so the news was, you know, on the East Coast. Came out of Washington, out of New York. So it's been 3 hours since the news has been out, and all the media in California have noted that. So I'm driving on the freeway, on the 210 freeway, looking at people next to me. I was telling Tim, look, I wonder if they're listening to the same station I'm listening to. I couldn't believe what I was hearing on the news. But by the time I got to school, I could believe it, because all the media in the world were sitting in front of my school, so were all the kids, wondering what was going on. Mary Lou Elliott was the first principal who was invited to join Rotary. She and I were principals at the same time. So we were invited to be interviewed by Warren Olney. He was the CBS newscaster at the time. I think he now works for NPR or one of the other stations. But we were invited to be interviewed by Warren Olney, and so our superintendent said, you guys need to come up to the district office. We have to take this party away from the schools. And so Mary Lou and I went to the district office, and we sat in the boardroom where for probably 3 or 4 hours, Warren Olney asked very interesting questions, most of them directed to me because I was the incoming president, and to most of which I gave what I thought were pretty studied and intelligent answers. I mean, I'm not the slouch. I can answer simple questions about Rotary, and I answered them to the best. And near the end of the interview, in fact, we were already on our feet, Warren said, Sylvia, tell me, how did you get selected to be president of Rotary? And this was where I died. Because I said, oh, I don't know. I must have missed the meeting. Isn't that what most of you say when somebody says, how'd you get? I said, I must have missed the meeting. And I went home that night. That was a very unstudied answer. I went home that night, and the story was on the top of the news. And guess what they played? Oh, I don't know. I must have missed the meeting, And here's the whole world sitting out there saying, it took us 11 years to get somebody to tell us this. But I learned. I'm a quick study. And I learned then that I had to be a little more careful about what I said when there was a camera in my face. So that was my boo-boo, and I learned. So if you interview me now, the gentleman who interviewed me, I don't say I must have missed the meeting. I said I worked hard for months and years, and yeah, okay. So back at the club, we really had to move our meeting place because we couldn't accommodate all the visitors. Everybody wanted to come and see. And this was the year that Polio Plus was beginning, and so we had busy things to do. We had some interesting telephone calls, including one that asked if the food were any better now that there were women in Rotary. And I said, well, no, we're not cooking it. We didn't get a welcome back from Rotary International, but we did get a new due schedule, which meant we knew that they knew that we were there. And of course, in 1989, at the Council on Legislation, after an impassioned plea by one of our presidents, they voted to accept women in Rotary. But it wasn't, remember, this was 1987, or 1989, the COL. It was not until 2004 that the Rotarian magazine printed several articles about women in Rotary. And then, you have to get this, I was the centerfold. But I was told before I was interviewed to wear a black turtleneck and all the other conservative-looking dress. And so that I was fully clothed in the centerfold. So Rotary has removed, finally, the last vestiges of sexist language so that now they profit most who serve the best, not he profits most who serves the best. And even more new, a club may not be chartered unless its membership is open. I didn't say is constituted of, open to both men and women. In fact, I think there's a club in New Jersey still that has no women because it says it cannot find capable women. So a number of us are planning to move to New Jersey to see if we can get into that club. So this didn't start as a women's issue, but as a simple attempt to recruit more members into Rotary. So has that worked? Can men and women work together in Rotary? Well, they certainly have. The first job I was asked to do in Rotary was to chair the four-way speech contest. And I remember the district governor coming and asking me, because I was an educator and he thought I had access to students, if I would do the four-way speech contest. And I said, of course I can. Just give me your papers from last year and, I'll take it from there. And he said, papers? We don't keep notes. Nobody kept notes on anything. We had to kind of reinvent the wheel and write them down so people who came on could benefit from them and change them as they wished. So it's been 30 years or more, and here we are in an organization diversified at least by gender. It's already diversified by the occupations that people have. And the objective is to include not just classifications of every kind, genders of every kind. People's differences need to be respected. We need to be aware of ethnic and cultural differences as we recruit members, and we need to be inclusive. And we're not talking about exclusion, we're talking about inclusion. So that was the beginning of my journey through that humanitarian organization that's known as Rotary. And the beginning of the opportunity to serve in an ever-shrinking world, the opportunity to meet men and women who can see and articulate a need and its solutions, no matter how difficult the problem or how meager the resources. A number of people have talked about Sam Green, who was a membership chair, and our previous RI presidents. I was just in an incredibly fortunate place when all of this happened, because it's brought such bounty into my life. And I've served my district in many positions, and of course as district governor. I've spoken to zone institutes in my own zone, but also in Kentucky, in Minneapolis, in Kansas City. I've done your Lone Star Pets and a lot of things. And in Evanston, I spoke to headquarters staff who were interested in the story that many of them didn't know. I've also addressed the International Assembly of more than 530 district governors from around the world. That came up because Ron Burton was the incoming president when I was the incoming RI president, when I was the RI, when I was an incoming governor. And he asked me, because he saw the female issue as an issue of diversity, and he asked me if I would talk on diversity. Can you believe that? He's asking a black woman to talk on diversity? I had so much to say, but I had a lot of research to do, and I really have had the pleasure of talking to countless people here and overseas about diversity. I also had the district pleasure of speaking at the Rotary Club of Melbourne. I'm a tennis fan. Really, I don't like basketball. I really don't like the Warriors. I just like Steph Curry. He's the cutest thing out there. But I'm a real tennis buff. And I went to tennis in Melbourne and met President Risley and talked to his club. I've made up in a lot of international places, most notably the Rotary Club of Clapham in London, the year after the Supreme Court issue, where I was the first female visitor they ever had, never mind female Rotarian. And they drank to my health on the same glass of champagne in which they drank to the Queen's health. So that was a plus. So what have other women done? The first district governors were seated probably about 7 years after this issue, and there have been many district governors since then, and women are fully involved and fully subscribed to the business of Rotary. So some years ago I participated in a NIDS campaign, and if you guys have not done a NIDS campaign, you should, because that's seeing firsthand and taking firsthand note of what it means to put some inoculating drops in a small child's mouth and know that that child is never going to get polio, and to see people who are lining up to get those drops or to have a purple pinky because you've inoculated children. So I participated in a NIDS campaign in India, and there was very little that compares with that. But while I was in India, I also had a chance to visit a school that was started by Deepa Willingham, who I think is originally from Houston area. She is an Indian woman who was born and raised in India, but came to the U.S. when she was a teenager, went to high school and went to college here, settled in Houston. I think she still owns a home in Houston. But she was determined that she was going to start a school for girls because girls didn't go to school in India. In fact, I think I was telling Rebecca today that if you walk into an Indian hospital, almost every Indian hospital, there's a plaque on the wall that says, in this hospital, a fetus may not be aborted because it is female, because that was the custom. If you're carrying a baby and it's a girl, you can have it aborted because girls had no value whatsoever. And that is beginning to change. And Deepa also has the school. She started this school in a number of little rooms in a village called Piali. And the only thing that village had going for it was a water well that was put there by the Rotary Club of Kolkata, it's now called Metropolitan. But that club really oversees this school. This is a school where we had girls 11 years old who were coming to school for the first time. They were in kindergarten, never learned to read and write. And girls were raised just to be given or sold to men who wanted a wife, maybe. However, we supported the school during my governor's year, and they now have a 4-story school building that has a computer lab, a science lab, hot and cold running water. It was really interesting. We had to teach the girls how to use hot and cold running water, how to flush toilets, and all of that stuff, how not to put the paper towel roll in the toilet, and all of that good stuff. They have organic gardening. We have high school students and college students who go from the U.S. then do internships there, and it's a growing organization, and you can look it up online on paceuniversal.org. paceuniversal.org. PACE is promise of assurance to children everywhere, and it keeps you going with the school. They also are on Facebook. So service to others really is a continuation. I was telling Tim of what my grandmother taught when I was growing up. I mean, she was the neighborhood helper. She helped everybody in the neighborhood, and I watched her. And I'm going to tell you one little interesting story that characterized for me what she was doing. We lived on a main road, and the trolley cars went by, and so somebody was always working on the trolley lines. And I remember one morning, and you remember, this is Jamaica, okay, small country, and there are differences. They're not ethnic differences, but there are class differences between people. However, I remember one morning watching a man knock at our gate and hand my grandmother this little package of food, and he didn't give it to her. He said, "Do you have a stove? Can I borrow a stove? Can I borrow a fire?" He said. He meant a little stove. He wanted to fix his lunch on it. And she looked at the little package and she said, "I'll take it, I'll fix it. I'll fix it for you." And she opened it up. There was a little piece of codfish and a little piece of yam or something, and he just wanted to cook it and eat it for his lunch. And she said, "He doesn't have any oil, he doesn't have any onions, he doesn't have any tomatoes," all that good stuff. And she went and she got all that stuff and she fixed it for him, put it on a plate and served it to him. And I watched this open mouth because I had never seen anything like this. And I said, "You don't know this man. Why are you doing this? We don't even talk to people who work on the streets outside our house. Why are you doing this for him?" She said, "Because that's what you do." She said, "I do it for him. Somebody will do it for you someday." And she's so right. Many people have done it for me. But I watched her, and I learned. So I've learned over the years that my community is not just the residential area in which I live, or the town that supports it, or the state that governs it. We are citizens of the world, are we not? Look at the headlines in the newspapers, and that's what it is. Every action, however remote or seemingly far removed, has a ripple effect on us and all others. That's how it works. So the news that grabs our attention these days has to do with what is largely a denial of the diverse people that we are. People are still being organized by race, color, creed, ethnicity, religious persuasion, and sexual orientation. And as Rotarians with a worldwide presence, we are conveniently situated to effect change, and we can do it through conscious inclusion. And the other thing I like to know, is telling people about Rotary. I tell people, wear your pin every day, tell people about Rotary. I fly a lot, mostly on airplanes. And if you sit, I don't know what else that might mean, okay? But if you're sitting next to someone who looks like they might be a good candidate, you know, most people get on the airplane, they sit next to you, they take out their iPad, they plug it in, and that's it. They're in another zone. But sometimes somebody will sit and say, "Hi, are you getting off at the next stop?" or something like that. So if you think you might have somebody who might be a good Rotarian sitting next to you, just kind of drop your Rotary pin on the floor. Then try to pick it up. You ever try to pick up anything on the floor on the airplane, in between the seats? You know, unless you're Simone Biles or one of those contortionists, you can't get down there, okay? So while you're struggling to pick up the pin, if this guy is going to be a good Rotarian, he'll say, "Can I help you? What are you looking for?" And he said, "My Rotary pin." "Rotary pin? What's Rotary?" Hey, there's your opening. You need to have those little blue cards, "What is Rotary?" And you give him one and you say, "You mean you're not in Rotary?" You tell him all about Rotary, and you get his name, and you call his little town, and you tell them, you know, and that just might be another Rotarian. Even better if it's a woman, you know, you get all of her details. And there's one more person. And I tell you, wear your pin all the time. In fact, when you go home at night and you go to bed, take it off your suit and put it on your pajamas. Why are you laughing? You know, you put on your pajamas and your spouse says to you, "Why are you putting that on your pajamas?" "Because it's Rotary. Rotary is important and I want it with me all the time." So the next morning he's around the coffee pot talking to his friends and he said, "You won't believe what my wife did last night. She wore her Rotary pin to bed on her pajamas." And the person he's talking to says, "What's Rotary?" And there you go. You just keep passing it on, okay? So you just keep passing it on. So the other thing to do is to remember that when you're working in your communities, there are people with whom you work who would probably make good Rotarians, some of those beneficiaries. Invite them to join Rotary. Invite them to join you in some of the work that you're doing in Rotary, and you just might be able to find more Rotarians. So there are many people who have to join. Most people you say, "Why aren't you a Rotarian?" "I've never been asked." Isn't that most of the answers that you get? "Why aren't you in Rotary?" "Nobody's ever invited me to join Rotary." And so invite people to join Rotary. So especially young people, because those young people are our hope for tomorrow. New ideas, new ways of meeting, and the energy and zeal that is not ours for long. So many of the changes you see from Rotary today, the different meeting places, the different times, came right out of the COL. A lot of the legislations, and a lot of them came from new generation suggestions. So young people have a lot to add to Rotary, so include them as you look for members. They're important as cultivating diversity. It's another diversity in your club. But that's a topic for another speech. So I'm a Rotarian who in this ever-shrinking world will work to find others who can help to make it a happier place, cleaner, more self-sustaining, and more peaceful than it was when I came into it. I will support the fact that Rotary functions on the edge of tomorrow, a tomorrow which will see the eradication of polio by lots of fine men and women of character who, in service above self, know that they profit most who serve the best. Thank you.
That was amazing. Thank you so much for being with us today. You know, when Rebecca told Becky that I was going to be bringing Dr. Whitlock from Houston to Beaumont, she got a little nervous. And so Becky gave me two directives. One, don't get lost. And number two, don't ask her any questions that would embarrass our club. But we made it from Houston to Beaumont okay, and last night she was telling Becky that the best part about the whole trip was when we went through Lake Charles, Louisiana. But I did have one question that I had to ask her, and I was a little nervous about doing this, and I said, Dr. Whitlock, do you ever get tired of telling this story? And she immediately said, no, I don't. I get energized every time I tell it because it opens some doors. Because of that experience, it opens some doors that she's able to serve not only her local community, but the greater community at large internationally. And she's been to a lot of places. So I'm very grateful that she spent time with us today. She is the mouse that roared. And Dr. Whitlock, since you were here on your behalf, our Rotary Foundation, the Beaumont Rotary Foundation, will make a donation in your honor to the Rotary Foundation, supporting one of the 6 areas of focus, and that is women and children. Also, our club members wanted to make a donation too, because we know that you're very passionate about the Piali Junction Women and Children's School in Indy as well. So we will also make a donation on your behalf there. Dr. Whitlock will be here for a little bit. A great opportunity to get an autographed copy of her book, Women Also Serve. I've read it twice. It's a great read, so please be around for that if you want to ask her any questions. Also, we deliberately did not make announcements today, so we would give Dr. Whitlock plenty of time to speak. So read your Rotarygrams. A lot's happening in the next few weeks, and so you don't want to miss out on that. Again, I want to thank Lynn and Uliana for being up here, and also Rebecca for a great job of leading the efforts today. Now, if we will stand together and say the 4-way test of the things that we think, say, and do. First,
Is it the truth?
second,
Is it fair for all concerned?
third,
Will build goodwill and better friendships.
fourth.
Will be beneficial for all concerned.
Let's go make a difference.